August 16, 1977. Graceland. A 9-year-old girl wakes up in a mansion that has become a tomb. Her father, the king of rock and roll, is dead upstairs. But that's not what haunts her. It's what she saw, what she heard, what she remembers from the hours before he died. For over 40 years, Lisa Marie Presley carried those memories in silence. The world knew Elvis died, but nobody knew what his daughter witnessed in those final moments. Nobody knew what she carried. Until she couldn't stay silent anymore. What she revealed changes everything we thought we knew about that day. Here is the story. Graceland in the summer of 1977 was a beautiful prison. The white columns gleamed in the Memphis heat. The wrought iron gates kept the fans at bay, screaming and crying and holding vigil day and night. Ooh. Inside, the air conditioning hummed constantly, keeping the temperature cold enough to preserve a man who was already fading. The carpets were thick, the rooms were dark. And everywhere, there was the smell of medication, sweat, and desperation masked by expensive cologne. Elvis Aaron Presley was 42 years old. He should have been in his prime. Instead, he was a ghost haunting his own life. The man who once electrified the world, who made girls faint and parents panic, who changed music forever, was barely recognizable. His face was bloated. His hands shook. His words slurred. The jumpsuits had to be redesigned constantly to hide the weight gain. The performances were becoming painful to watch. And the people around him, the ones who should have saved him, were too terrified or too loyal or too dependent to tell him the truth. But there was one person in that house who still saw him as invincible. Lisa Marie Presley, 9 years old, daddy's girl, the only child of Elvis and Priscilla. She lived between two worlds, her mother's home in Los Angeles, where things were calm and normal, and Graceland, where her father was a king in a crumbling kingdom. When she visited Memphis, she had the run of the house. She stayed up late. She watched movies in the screening room. She rode golf carts around the property. And she believed, with the certainty only a child can have, that her daddy would live forever. She had no idea that August 1977 would be the last time she'd see him alive. But here's what nobody knew for decades. Lisa Marie wasn't just in the house when Elvis died. She was awake. She was there. And she saw things that night. Things that didn't make it into the official story. Things that were buried beneath the headlines and the grief and the spectacle of the king's death. What happened in those final hours? What did a 9-year-old girl witness that she couldn't speak about for 40 years? The truth is darker and more heartbreaking than anyone imagined. Elvis knew something was wrong. The tour was scheduled to start again in 2 days. Portland, Maine. Another show. Another city. Another performance where he would struggle through the hits while his body betrayed him on stage. He'd done it before. Forgotten lyrics. Lost his balance. Slurred his way through a Can't Help Falling in Love while the audience pretended not to notice. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, kept booking the shows. The money had to keep flowing. The machine couldn't stop, even if the man at the center of it was dying. But that August night, Elvis couldn't sleep. He never could anymore. The insomnia was relentless. The drugs that were supposed to help him rest only made things worse, trapping him in a twilight state where he wasn't awake, but wasn't truly asleep either. So he did what he always did. He stayed up. He read. He watched television. He called people at 3 a.m. to talk about spirituality, or conspiracy theories, or whatever obsession had gripped him that night. And he took more pills, always more pills. Lisa Marie was staying at Graceland that week. She was supposed to fly back to Los Angeles soon, back to her mother, back to school. But that night she was still there, still in the house, still close enough to her father to feel the weight of something wrong pressing down on everything. She later described the atmosphere in Graceland during those final days as heavy, oppressive. Like everyone was waiting for something terrible to happen, but nobody would say it out loud. The staff moved quietly through the halls. The hangers-on and yes-men who surrounded Elvis spoke in hushed tones, and Elvis himself, the center of it all, seemed more distant, more unreachable, like he was already halfway gone. Lisa Marie saw her father that evening. They spent time together, played, talked. He was affectionate, the way he always was with her. But she noticed something in his eyes, a sadness, an exhaustion that went deeper than just being tired. He kissed her goodnight, told her he loved her. And she went to bed believing she'd see him in the morning. She didn't know it was goodbye. As the night wore on, Elvis spiraled. His girlfriend, Ginger Alden, was asleep in his bed. He couldn't rest, couldn't settle. The anxiety and the insomnia and the drugs churned inside him, creating a storm that no amount of medication could calm. He tried to read. He tried to relax. But his body was failing. His heart, swollen and damaged from years of abuse, was barely keeping up. His system, flooded with codeine and Dilaudid and a dozen other prescriptions, was at its breaking point. Around 2:30 in the morning, he told Ginger he was going to the bathroom to read. Did this often. Spent hours in there with a book, trying to find some peace in the only room where nobody would bother him. She mumbled something and went back to sleep. The door closed, and Elvis Presley was alone. Quick question. Have you ever felt something was wrong but couldn't name it? That instinct in your gut that screams at you even when everything seems normal? That's what Lisa Marie felt that night. She didn't know why. She was 9 years old. But somewhere in that house, while her father sat in that bathroom struggling to breathe, she sensed it. Let us know in the comments if you've ever had that feeling about someone you loved. Hours passed. The house stayed dark. And upstairs, in a bathroom that would become infamous, the king of rock and roll collapsed. It was early afternoon when Ginger Alden woke up. She'd been asleep for hours alone in Elvis's bed. She called out for him. No answer. She assumed he was still in the bathroom, but something felt off. Too quiet, too still. She walked to the door and knocked. Nothing. She opened it. Elvis was on the floor, face down, his pajama bottoms around his ankles, his body stiff and discolored. The book he'd been reading, The Scientific Search for the Face of Jesus, lay nearby, its pages scattered. Ginger screamed. The sound tore through Graceland like a siren, shattering the silence and unleashing chaos. The staff came running. Joe Esposito, Elvis's road manager and closest friend, burst into the room. He saw Elvis on the floor and immediately started trying to revive him, turned him over, started CPR, screamed for someone to call an ambulance. Phew. But even as he pressed on Elvis's chest, even as he breathed into his mouth, he knew. Elvis was gone. The body was cold. Stiff. He'd been dead for hours. Downstairs, Lisa Marie heard the screaming. Nobody tells a 9-year-old what's happening when the world is ending. Lisa Marie knew something was wrong the second the screaming started. She'd been playing, probably in one of the many rooms of Graceland, lost in the kind of innocent world children create for themselves. But that scream shattered everything. It was primal, terrified. The kind of sound that makes your blood freeze even if you don't understand why. People started running. Staff members, family. Everyone moving with frantic, desperate energy. She saw adults crying, saw people on phones, voices shaking. Saw her grandmother, Minnie Presley, Elvis's grandmother who lived at Graceland, collapse in grief. But nobody stopped to explain. Nobody sat her down and told her what happened. Years later, Lisa Marie would describe this moment with haunting clarity. She was there, in the house, while they tried to save her father, while they loaded his body onto a stretcher, while they rushed him to Baptist Memorial Hospital in a futile attempt to make it look like there was still hope. And she didn't know. Not really. She felt the grief, saw the devastation. But she was a child, and the adults around her were too shattered to protect her from what was happening. She remembered the ambulance, the sirens, the way Graceland suddenly filled with people, strangers and officials and family members who appeared out of nowhere. She remembered faces twisted in anguish, remembered the suffocating weight of loss pressing down on everyone. But most of all, she remembered the absence. Her father was supposed to be there, and suddenly he wasn't. But here's what Lisa Marie revealed decades later in interviews and in her own memoir. The truth that she carried in silence for most of her life. She saw him, not alive, but after. She saw her father's body on that stretcher. Saw them wheeling him out of Graceland, through the halls she'd run through as a child, past the rooms where they'd played and laughed. She saw his face, saw the stillness. And even at 9 years old, even without understanding death the way adults do, she knew. He was gone. Nobody meant for her to see it. In the chaos, in the desperate scramble to save Elvis or at least preserve the illusion that he could be saved, nobody thought to shield the child from the horror. She was just there. A ghost in her own home, watching the nightmare unfold. And it broke something in her. Lisa Marie later said that what haunted her most wasn't just losing her father. It was the way she lost him. The confusion, the terror, the image of his body being taken away while everyone around her fell apart. She was too young to process it. Too young to grieve properly, so she buried it, carried it, let it fester inside her for years. She also revealed something else, something that adds another layer of tragedy to an already unbearable story. In the hours before Elvis died, she'd sensed something was wrong. That heaviness in the house get the that feeling that something terrible was coming. But she didn't have the words for it, didn't know what to do with it. She was 9, so she went to bed. And when she woke up, her father was dead. What would you have done in that moment? If you were a child sensing danger but not understanding it, would you have spoken up? Would you have known how? Comment below, because this is the part that destroys you. She felt it, and she couldn't stop it. By mid-afternoon, the world knew. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was dead at 42. The news spread like wildfire, radio stations interrupted programming, television networks broke into scheduled shows. Fans flooded the streets around Graceland, wailing and collapsing and holding each other in shared grief. The gates became a shrine, covered in flowers and notes and teddy bears. The world mourned. But inside Graceland, a little girl tried to understand why her daddy wasn't coming back. The official story was quick and clean. Elvis Presley died of a heart attack. Cardiac arrhythmia, they called it. The family, the estate, and the Memphis officials moved fast to control the narrative. There was an autopsy, but the results were sealed. Rumors swirled immediately. Drugs, overdose, suicide. But the Presley machine shut it down. The king died of natural causes. His heart gave out. That was the story, and they stuck to it. But the truth was messier, darker. The toxicology report, which wouldn't be fully revealed for years, showed Elvis had 14 different drugs in his system when he died. Codeine, morphine, Quaaludes, Valium, Dilaudid. His body was a pharmacy. His colon was impacted, swollen to twice its normal size from years of prescription drug abuse and terrible diet. His heart was enlarged and damaged. He didn't just die. He'd been dying for years, and everyone around him had let it happen. Lisa Marie grew up knowing the official story was a lie. She didn't have the details at first, but she knew. She'd seen the pills, seen her father's decline, seen the way people enabled him, fed him medication, kept him performing even when he could barely stand. She knew that his death wasn't some tragic, unavoidable event. It was the result of years of neglect, exploitation, and addiction that nobody stopped. And she carried that anger, that betrayal, for decades. It wasn't until she was an adult, until she'd lived through her own battles with addiction and grief, that Lisa Marie began to speak openly about what happened. In interviews in her memoir, she described Graceland in those final years as a place of darkness. She talked about the enablers who surrounded her father, the doctors who prescribed him anything he wanted, the hangers-on who depended on him financially and emotionally and wouldn't risk his anger by telling him no. She also revealed the guilt she carried. The irrational, devastating guilt of a child who thought maybe, somehow, she could have saved him. If she'd stayed awake that night. If she'd gone to check on him. If she'd understood what that heavy feeling in the house meant. It didn't matter that she was 9 years old. It didn't matter that there was nothing she could have done. Grief doesn't care about logic, but here's the part that stayed hidden for the longest time. The part that Lisa Marie finally revealed in the years before her own death in 2023. She talked to him that night. Not just earlier in the evening before bed, later. She woke up at some point, she didn't know what time, and she went looking for her father. She didn't find him. The house was dark, quiet. But she remembered calling out for him, remembered the silence that answered her. And then she went back to bed, believing everything was fine. Was that the moment? Was her father already in that bathroom, already dying while she called for him in the dark? She'd never know. But the possibility haunted her for the rest of her life. So here's the question. Was it coincidence that she woke up that night? Or was it something deeper, some bond between father and daughter that made her sense he needed her? Let us know what you think in the comments, because this detail changes everything. Fast forward to the funeral. Thousands of people lined the streets. The service was held at Graceland. Lisa Marie was there, of course, dressed in black. Numb. She walked past her father's open casket, saw him one last time, made up and dressed and utterly lifeless. And she didn't cry, couldn't cry. The grief was too big, too incomprehensible for a child to process. It would take decades for her to truly mourn him. Lisa Marie Presley spent her entire life in the shadow of her father's death. She became the keeper of his legacy, the the sole heir to Graceland and the Presley estate. She defended his memory fiercely, but she also lived with the trauma of that day. The image of his body being taken away, the confusion, the guilt, the anger at the people who failed him. It shaped everything: her relationships, her struggles with addiction, her own battles with depression and loss. In interviews near the end of her own life, Lisa Marie was brutally honest. She said that being Elvis Presley's daughter was both a gift and a curse. She loved him desperately, but she also resented the way his fame consumed everything, the way his death left her alone and adrift. She talked about how Graceland felt like a mausoleum, how she could barely stand to visit because every room reminded her of what she'd lost, and she made sure the truth came out. She pushed for transparency about her father's addiction. She spoke about the doctors and enablers who killed him. She refused to let the sanitized mythological version of Elvis erase the real man, the flawed man, the man who loved her but couldn't save himself. When Lisa Marie died in January 2023, at the age of 54 from cardiac arrest, the parallels were impossible to ignore. Father and daughter, both dying of heart failure, both struggling with demons that fame and fortune couldn't fix. She's buried at Graceland now, next to her father and her son Benjamin, who took his own life in 2020. 3 generations of tragedy in one family, but Lisa Marie's final act was to tell the truth, to refuse to let the lies and the legends bury the reality of what happened to her father. To make sure that people understood, Elvis didn't have to die. He was failed by the people who were supposed to protect him, and she, as a 9-year-old girl, witnessed that failure in the most traumatic way possible. So here is the question for you. If you could go back and change one moment in history, one decision that could have saved someone you loved, would you? What would you sacrifice for that chance? Let us know in the comments, and let us know, which untold story should we cover next? Marilyn Monroe's final phone call, or the dark truth behind James Dean's death? Comment below. Lisa Marie Presley is gone, but this story needed to be told. The truth died with Elvis, but his daughter made sure the world knew what really happened. And unfortunately, they don't make families like the Presleys anymore. Tragic, legendary, and unforgettable.